As you can see, it's working. It's working flawlessly. Not because we needed new cables and stuff, but because we switched to Linux. So welcome to the very first Linux video I'm ever going to have made on this channel. I say ever going to have made because I might do some follow-ups to us trying out this box here that we built. But in all of the time that I have been doing YouTube, every of the time since August 26, 2012, I have never touched a Linux topic in my life. Why? Because you guys scare the shit out of me because you guys are some opinionated mother... Enhance your professional monitor setup with the Viewsonic VP27885K, featuring 100% sRGB, 99% DCI-P3 colors, and HDR400 for deep contrast that align perfectly with Mac's industry-leading color performance. The VP27885K supports laptops, PCs, Macs, and more with Thunderbolt 4, USB-C, HDMI DisplayPort, and USB inputs. If you're looking to increase your screen real estate for projects, click the link in the description for more.
Yeah, how come you're not using Arch Linux?
The last time I touched the Linux kernel was Ubuntu back in like 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. It's been a long time. That was back when I worked in a software development office and I was bored. I had a laptop up and was messing around in that, but I never got serious about it. So today's perspective is going to be a gaming system for Linux, well, a gaming system built running Linux, to kind of just see what it's like from a very beginner's perspective. Look, I am not versed in Linux. And what I'm gonna ask of you guys, because I wanna get aggressive with you down in the comments and start blocking people and stuff, you are going to probably have a different way to approach this. That's the thing with Linux being open source, is the fact that there is a bajillion different ways that you can do it. And yes, what is the old saying? You can tell the people that are running Arch because they'll tell you. Do you know how many of you told me you're running Arch in the comments of the video where we were running Bazite? Anyway, that's what we're doing today. We're running Bazite. It's a very easy install process. You're up and running very fast. It was pretty flawless. In fact, that's what got our stuff working back there, even though I spent another $100 and something bucks on cables I didn't need to spend. This is the system I built for that. So what I actually wanted to say before I started to say I don't want to get aggressive in the comments, if you have what you think is a better approach for this, please respectfully put it down in the comments, but include some information that's actually useful, not why did you go with Bazite and not yada yada, because guess what? That doesn't tell you anything. All that does is come off as a pedantic put down. So, if you're going to recommend a different distro of some sort, say, I recommend this distro because, and it has a user rating in terms of difficulty 1 to 10 of put a number. Now, keep in mind, if you're approaching people that are beginners, what might seem like a 5 difficulty to you might be a 10 to someone that's new. So try to put yourself back in the perspective of being new. I know it's hard for a lot of you Linux folks, but bear with me. We're going to try this here today. So here's the system that I built. It is running a 14700K and a Z790 ITX board from ASRock. It's ASRock Phantom Gaming. Really because it's the only ITX board that I have. 32 gigabytes of DDR5 running 6400 mega transfers at CL38. Nothing super fast or crazy. It does have a 240 millimeter AIO that is cooling it. It's an old Fantex MPG or MPH240. We used to joke around, it's the miles per hour. It's got an 850 watt SFX power supply because we are also, for the GPU, running a 20 gigabyte 7900 XTX AMD card. And the reason for that is Linux support for AMD graphics cards tends to be better than NVIDIA. Although NVIDIA does seem to be improving in terms of the graphics support, at least on Bazite, because Phil actually went home after he did the wall. Phil set this up and set himself up a dual boot laptop that runs Bazite as well, and he was playing Cyberpunk and other games and kind of doing some performance comparisons and stuff, and said everything appeared to be working. DLSS was working, ray tracing was working, like it was a pretty seamless experience. Like he also set it up on his desktop, which is an RTX 4080 with a 13700K, and that was another flawless experience for him. In fact, if you're just in there playing the game and you hand the controls to someone and they're playing, they would never know they're playing on Linux. That's how seamless it is. Now, obviously, there's gonna be limitations to what you can do with Linux. Now, in terms of desktop and software support, you gotta look into individual software you want to run to see if it has Linux installs and the level of support that's going to be supported for the OS. But like, for instance, OBS does have, if you wanna do live streaming, does have a Linux install. Like for instance, my Insta360 Link 2 camera that's got the gimbal and all that does have a driver and stuff that works, but it's unknown yet because I haven't tried it, whether or not I'll get the software to run, which gives me the gimbal control. So it might turn the device into the most basic version of the device. So for instance, my Rodecaster 2, which we use in our podcast room, yes, I know we haven't podcasted in forever, hopefully this Friday. But anyway, I digress. It basically, the software itself won't run in Linux, which allows me to drag and drop like sound effects and pad samples and all that sort of stuff. However, everything else, it'll work as like a giant DAC at that point. And that's okay for Linux if I don't care about the sound pads and stuff and programming them, because everything we would need that to do is actually controlled on board the Rodecaster. So all of the mixer and all of the compressors and all that stuff is built in. It doesn't need the software to run. However, what we do use the software for is when we record the audio and offload that into the software, which then transcodes it into an MP3 for us that we upload to Buzzsprout to then syndicate it to all of the podcasting services. That is built into the software. So we would have to figure out a workaround for that. It's not impossible, it's just these are the kinds of things that you take on when you go into an open source OS like Linux or any of the million distros that are out there versus all the native Windows support. So kind of in a nutshell, for gaming, pretty good support. Content creation, we'll give it a middle thumb depending on what you're trying to do. Like Adobe and all that really isn't gonna work on Linux. However, DaVinci Resolve theoretically does. So we haven't tried it, but that's what we're reading. And then when it comes to like, there's a lot of other programs and stuff that just straight up aren't gonna work on Linux at all. But fortunately though, there's like OpenRGB and a lot of third-party support to actually be able to control like your RGB software and stuff, or like Phil, for instance, has like the Razer Synapse stuff and other Razer devices and RGB devices that actually natively worked in Linux through a program called OpenRazer that works in Linux. So you're gonna have your results and your mileage will vary. But like I said, we're using Bazite today. So we're gonna set this up over here. Phil's gonna kind of walk me through it because I've never done it. And by him walking me through it, he's gonna be walking you through it.
We haven't done this in a bit. Okay, so the first thing you gotta do is obviously
Make it install media.
Yeah, we're gonna assume that you already have at least one working computer.
Or laptop.
Yeah, or something.
Or friend's computer. So what does immutable mean?
The OS is on its own separate partition that's read-only from the user standpoint.
So you can't mess it up.
But basically, immutable just means it's a lot more idiot-proof than your standard like Linux distribution where...
Because Linux is full power. Like most like Arch and all that, you can go in there and really mess things up.
That's Arch's whole philosophy is that...
It's a build your own OS.
Yeah, exactly. Build your own piecemeal, like, you know what I mean? You get the installer, you install what packages you want, et cetera, et cetera. Bazite is like, let's take an already established distro like Fedora, make it immutable so that it's a lot more difficult for the user to kind of mess up the OS. And then let's add all of the gaming specific packages that things like SteamOS and Valve have done.
Now I want to step in real quick. A lot of people had negative things to say about it being an immutable because they're probably Linux power users, which is why you wouldn't want that. But this is, again, from the perspective of someone that maybe just built their first system, doesn't have Windows, doesn't want to buy Windows. You can get up in gaming with AAA titles like this for free.
Yep.
Now there's free ways to get Windows, but this is obviously an anti-Windows type of video here. So it says right here, own games outside of Steam, Lutris, which is pre-installed, and other launchers can only run games from most game stores, but cleanly integrate them into Steam gaming mode, which includes EA app, Epic Games, GOG, itch.io, Rockstar, Ubisoft, your dad's old CDs and more. So basically it's like a one-stop gaming launcher OS type service, but you obviously have other things built into it, like you have your browser and a desktop and you can stream from it and all that.
When we download Bazite, you'll see the option for, if you click the button up there, so it starts with what hardware are you using.
Oh wait, what are the other hardwares? So desktop, home theater, PC, framework, desktop, handhelds, okay. Laptops, and then VMs obviously. All right, so desktop, what is the vendor of your primary GPU? So we're gonna say AMD RX 4000 plus. Oh, it even supports Arc. That's cool. Arc and NVIDIA. And then what desktop environment do you prefer? Steam OS, or what's GNOME?
GNOME is Fedora's default desktop environment. So the desktop environment is basically the user interface for the desktop mode.
So what do we have up here?
I have KDE up here just because I have a little bit more experience with it from Steam OS. This is the big one for basically if you want to run it as like a home theater PC or by default on a handheld, Steam Gaming Mode is enabled.
So what you're referring to is, do you want Steam Gaming Mode? This will automatically log into game mode and only supports a single user.
Yeah.
Is that like big picture?
Yeah, it is exactly big picture.
Okay.
It's actually, in fact, exactly how SteamOS handles it.
So I'm going to say no, because we still want this to be a full...
A desktop kind of computer in OS, yeah. So then you're just going to download the ISO. For Windows, I usually like to use Rufus for creating the USB.
Okay, so what about like motherboard drivers and like Wi-Fi adapter and chipsets and USB and all that stuff?
So that's the crazy thing about modern Linux is that basically all of those drivers, all support for like most modern Ethernet and Wi-Fi controllers and Bluetooth controllers and stuff is all built into the OS.
But for the record, like the stigma has always been NVIDIA support in Linux is terrible. But at least for Bazzite and your 4080 and the games that you tried it on, it was pretty seamless.
Yeah.
From a Windows experience.
I've heard anywhere from like a minus 15% to like 25% performance hit. Although I didn't really see that in the games I tested, which was like Cyberpunk and Control and a few other titles and stuff. But I haven't really
Yeah, you were seeing a couple of FPS difference.
Yeah. In fact, it's weird because even in Forza Horizon, I actually saw a gain in average FPS.
The stigma's changing finally.
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of just your mileage may vary depending on what game you're playing and like what architecture of NVIDIA card it is. As far as AMD is concerned, I've always heard that it's basically either a negligible performance difference or it's faster under Linux. Okay, cool. So our ISO is downloaded, so you're gonna go ahead and open Rufus.
Okay, so Rufus is open. Do we need to format our drive or anything?
Nope, it's going to nuke everything that's on that drive.
Okay, disk or ISO image, right?
Yep.
Please select.
So click the
that's gonna be the file, Bazzite,
Bazzite
the ISO.
AMD, and then just go ahead and hit start. Okay, we'll be back once the USB stick is burnt and then, jeez. Showing my age now.
It might burn it.
Once the USB stick is written, we'll be back and then we will show you how to install it on the computer.
So now take it to the system that we're gonna install Bazzite on.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so now he's got the USB stick in the new computer and...
So we're gonna go to BIOS and choose boot priorities to go to this, because this drive actually has a Windows OS on it.
Yeah.
So we need that nuked, and then obviously we are going to reinstall Bazzite over top of it. All right, so we want to make the boot option number 1 our Voyager, because that's we're using the Corsair Voyager stick. So if I just restart now, it should boot to that drive. Now obviously based on your OS, it's gonna probably look different, or not your OS, but your BIOS, it's gonna look different, so you're gonna have to kind of, if you don't know your BIOS very well, you're gonna have to look that up and figure out what works best.
But if you're building a brand new computer with nothing on the drive, then it'll just boot to the USB stick no matter what, yeah.
So let's see, install Bazzite.
Yep.
Or test the media and install. Should we?
No, I don't do it. Just extra time. Gotta live life on the edge.
So does that Bazzite 41 mean 4.1?
No, it's 41.
That many versions? Wow.
Remember how I said my first experience was in 2003 with Fedora 3?
Oh yeah.
It's Fedora 41 now, so.
So it's gonna look very hacker screeny. It's so going for the garbage file looking.
Oh yeah.
Installation destination, no disk selected. So I just select the disk.
I would set the time and date,
Oh.
time zone to Los Angeles first.
Now select my drive.
Yep.
So select a system, installation, destination. Okay, so boom.
Storage configuration, automatic, and then I would check that box that says free up space by removing or shrinking existing partitions because we want to nuke whatever else is on there.
Okay, so click free up space by removing and shrinking existing partitions. And done.
Yep.
We don't want to preserve any of these partitions. I
So there's a
just delete
delete
them.
all button?
Yeah.
So do
Wham. Delete.
that, and then hit reclaim space. And then if you want, you can connect to your network right now. Doesn't really matter.
Probably no point to, right?
Yep. And then the user will be default Bazzite with the password of Bazzite. And that's pretty much it as far as choices during install.
Hey, none of all those, we want to spy on new stuff.
Isn't that a bit refreshing?
Microsoft is no longer in the business of making OSs. The OS is nothing but a data mining tool.
Yeah, basically.
I'd love to know the real metrics on how much data Microsoft sells and how much money they make on the data versus the sales of Windows. Bet you they make more money on the sale of the data, which means they should just make Windows free at this point. So you're paying to be spied on.
Now it's done. So
Now it says reboot system,
click reboot and then
take the drive out. I mean, it should automatically change the boot loader, I think, to this now, right?
Yep.
So perform mock management.
That's
what is
for
mock?
So this is for secure boot stuff. You can just hit continue boot.
It's a little bitty wheel. Updating cargs. What's a carg? I bet you're gonna tell us.
Cool, so it's one reboot and it should be...
Was that like a selector?
That was the bootloader. So one of the cool things about Baselite and Fedora Atomic desktops is that you always get the current version of the OS, and then when it does an update, it keeps the last version as well. So in case an update breaks, you can get in the bootloader and then...
Cool. All right, so password should be Baselite. Oh, I like that background. That's cool. Okay, system fatal error, probably because we need internet. It does look very Windowsy so far.
Yeah.
Like enough to where you don't feel lost.
That's why I picked KDE, because GNOME is more Mac-like.
Connect to the internet. So Firefox is pre-installed. So this is application launcher. Oh, this is very Windowsy looking.
That's kind of why I chose KDE over GNOME, is GNOME is a little bit more Mac-like, KDE is a little bit more Windows-like, and so if you're, used to a Windows experience, I would recommend KDE.
That works.
You can buy our merch. Our merch is Linux compatible.
Wow, you can't get away from the constant Steam updater even on Linux, huh?
Yep.
Okay, so at this point, you should by now know how to log into your Steam, so you're gonna do that. I like to use the Steam utility or the Steam app to log in, so I have to remember my password. So let's see, OBS Studio. Hey, look at that. If they support Mac, they better support Linux. Oh yeah, and it does the, where's my mouse? It gets all big. All right. Download on FlatHub. com.obsproject.studio.flatpackref. I'm assuming that's File Explorer. So downloads.
Oh, cool. Nice. Okay.
Wow, that was easy.
I was worried that it was actually not going to be that complicated, or it was going to be more complicated.
But what I'm doing is I'm just trying to see, without you showing me, can I navigate to something? Like, on Mac OS, I always feel lost. And I've used Mac for years. But, okay, that's cool. So, yeah, so a lot of Linux programs I would hope would just link you to the right place in the store.
So the Discover store is, Baselite uses primarily a Flatpak style app install. So the Discover store is basically the repository for that. So usually, if you're going to be searching for an app, you would check Discover first, and then, or if you do Google it and then you find out it's in Flatpak, then you...
Okay, so here's everything installed here. Clearly you can see there's also themes. I'm assuming you could retheme and reskin.
Yeah, that's what stuff is all...
The stuff that's already installed that has updates that need to be done. So you can just auto-update it from here.
Yep.
Yeah, this looks exactly like I'm used to seeing. Okay, so that actually was very easy to get that. So far this looks very Windows-like. Now, big picture, obviously. So if we were to set this to big picture mode, whoops, which is what, right here? No, where is it?
Right
here.
Yep.
So if you would select that setting that said single user, big picture, or Steam OS mode, this is what would boot. Like it would go through all the Baselite stuff and then here.
Yep.
Like this is your OS at that point. Well, I don't care for big picture personally, but I just wanted to show people what that looked like. Show me how to find the games that are compatible with Linux. Because right now, this is gonna show me my whole library and stuff. But obviously not all of these games are gonna work with Linux.
The way Linux runs games is, if it's a Windows game, it'll run through a compatibility layer called Proton, which is what Valve has developed for SteamOS and the Steam Deck to basically get support for Windows games without having the developers have to make a Linux native version. All of them will attempt to run via Proton, but...
Let's see what happens if I try and run this like super indie game.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just curious. Now, while that's going, show me though where the store showed like the games that were like tested and...
Anything that says it'll run great on Steam Deck is basically what you're looking for. Click the collections, click create a new collection, and then create dynamic collection. And then if you go to the Steam Deck thingy, you can do verified only, which is they verified it works on Steam Deck, verified playable, or verified playable and untested.
Let's see.
Yeah, let's just see what happens.
This is a very indie game.
Chances are it should just work as if it was Windows. Hey, look at that. It literally just worked. A completely untested game.
Yeah, it's working just fine.
A lot different from your last Linux experience, I'm guessing.
Oh my God.
So as you can see, if you stick to the Steam ecosystem, it's very seamless. So if you're wondering what we're talking about when we're talking about a compatibility layer and Proton and stuff, so obviously a Windows game is going to expect Windows things like DirectX and...
Is it emulating the environment?
It's not an emulation, it's a translation. So what it does is basically translates like DirectX to Vulkan, which is the Linux native graphics API and that sort of stuff. So the point I want to mention about the whole it's not emulation is that that's why the performance hit is so tiny and or sometimes even a performance gain.
Here's a true test. This game, The Movies, is like 20 years old maybe? In fact, it's not even on the Steam store anymore. It's just because I have it. So let's see if this will run. Okay, well, I don't know. Maybe
It might be too old.
this one may not.
I saw like something over here.
Until I scrolled over it. So how do we now like force exit of a program?
Alt F4. Oh yeah, okay, so Alt F4 is still the same. Okay, cool.
Okay, so that one doesn't work. Okay, well, Locked Up is an indie game. The last major update was in 2021. Now, if you want to take the guesswork out of it, like you said, you can go to here, right? Linux stuffs, and then we can go to Steam Deck and verified and playable. Right, that'd probably be our best compatibility there, even though we've got the yellow. So now this will show us all the games that are like verified and playable.
For Steam Deck. Yeah.
For Steam Deck, which will translate over to Bazai. All right, here we go. So the last one we just did was an unknown game, Locked Up. It's just the last played today. Oh, there it goes. And that was an unknown. So just because it's not on the verified list doesn't mean it won't work. It just means obviously there's too many titles for them to have gone through and tested all of them, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it plays just fine with that. Yeah, it's working fine. Okay, now the other launchers.
Okay, so if you're going to be running stuff off of Epic or GOG or Amazon games, you're going to look for Heroic Games Launcher.
It's just called Heroic.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So download from FlatHub.
Yep.
Now this is going to translate those other launchers into this OS.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to log into each one.
Yeah, whichever one you wanna download from. So right now let's try Rocket League, which will be on the Epic Game Store. So
Go to library. Hey, there's Rocket League.
Cool.
So
you just click
download. Nice. Oh no! Okay, wait. Alt F4. We fixed it.
Yep.
Okay, so obviously with how Steam works, it's very familiar layout enough to where you don't feel lost if you're trying to move from Windows to this. Obviously with Heroic, we could do our other game launchers, and then you can use Lutris for like EA if you're playing EA games and such. Now we're talking about EA games and online gaming. That is where it's not all unicorns and rainbows because there's a problem with anti-cheat.
basically all of the big AAA multiplayer games, unfortunately, are just going to be a no-go because of the
for the multiplayer aspect of it. If they have a single player version you can play, but
Yeah.
you can't play like Battlefield 2042 online.
Yeah.
They have an offline bot mode and stuff, but so many of these games are battle royales and online only.
If it relies on an anti-cheat where the anti-cheat developers have said no to Linux.
Because what about like easy anti-cheat?
Yeah.
Or EAC?
EAC is pretty much the big one, so
That does or does not work?
does not work.
Okay, that
So
sucks, yeah.
games like Apex, Battlefield, Destiny, Fortnite, GTA, League, Roblox, Rust, Rainbow Six, Valorant, again, all the big AAA titles that are going to be multiplayer are.
So even though we just launched Rocket League, we wouldn't be able to play a match.
You could play a match on Rocket League. It doesn't use the easy anti-cheat.
You just listed Rocket League though.
No, I said Rainbow Six
Oh, they said Rocket.
and Roblox and Rust. Yeah, so older games like Rocket League that don't use easy anti-cheat are going to work fine. But yeah, that's pretty much the biggest.
And you were saying it's not so much the fact that it doesn't work on Linux, it's just they don't want to take the time to really make it work.
That's the
or keep it updated for Linux.
That's the most frustrating thing is, yeah, like, because easy anti-cheat has Linux like binaries for their anti-cheat and stuff. It's just the game developers they see Linux and they're just like, there's 10 million configurations, blah, blah, blah. We don't want to support it, so we just say no.
So that's the real downside. This is perfect for like single player gaming and stuff, or non-competitive online games that require the anti-cheat software. So just to kind of recap though, so it was, go to Bazite, download the ISO, you downloaded Rufus, you created the ISO, we put it in over here, did a fresh install, all the drivers and stuff. You notice we didn't load a single driver. Everything worked on its own. The wireless, the keyboard, the mouse, the graphics card, everything, because you select all that when you're creating your installer. Once we're up and running, the only things we installed separately was the Heroic Games Launcher, and that was it. Everything else was, an OBS. I installed OBS just to see if that would work.
Yep.
But I gotta say, for a first, I would consider myself first time. I haven't used Linux in like 14 years. And again, that was Ubuntu, which was not like a turnkey solution like this where you just play games. So I think if you're someone that's like, I want to mess around in Linux, I want to get my feet kind of like dip my toes in, but I don't want to be overwhelmed. I feel like Bazite is a really good way to start. Now, to keep this video very authentic, the Bazite team did reach out to me after we showed the video wall, but I did not respond to them other than to say, hey guys, thanks for welcoming me to the community. They did say if you have any problems or any issues, reach out to us, we can help you. But we didn't have any issue other than the installer like hanged for a second, but when we rebooted, it continued on.
Yeah.
So that was the only thing we experienced.
And who knows, that could be some weird, like, our BIOS is so out of date.
The BIOS is very out of date on this system. But yeah, and then as you can see, we were up and running as long as you know your logins to your stuff. So it was actually very simple. Now, I am very aware for all of you Linux elitists, which is so funny to say,
Yeah.
that this is such a locked down, simplified version of what Linux can be. Linux can be as basic as this or as complex as you want to make it. That's what is an open source OS. That's what that's all about. And that's where, like you were saying with Arch and other kernels and other distros, how you build your own OS based on the things you want to, plug and play in there. And that's the thing. You can go from this to that, or you can add another drive or partition and have multiple distros that you can boot into. So if you want to start tinkering, this is a really good place to start, I think.
I mean, I think just the biggest positive is that, as you saw, there's just no bloatware, there's no nagging, there's no like blah, 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 like, I mean, like, watch, if you go to...
It really makes me wish 3D Mark worked on here. I'd love to know what the...
I know, that's another one big thing that I notice is 3D Mark doesn't work. So if you go to system settings, and then you go to, scroll down to, where's updates? Update software is by default manually, and if you click notification frequency, you can set it to never bother you ever about system updates if you don't ever want to.
Windows will never do that because that's how they continue to update the way they steal your data.
Update the spyware. Yeah.
All right, well, time to go. Guys, I understand this was just a scratching the surface level of Linux. I prefaced that at the beginning of this video. And that's where I said, if you guys, I would love to know where you diehard power Linux users feel the next logical leap from Bazite would be for somebody that wants to start playing around. So like I said, please list down below, if you're gonna comment, keep it constructive and keep it useful. Say what distro you recommend, why, and its average user difficulty rating would be.
Yeah.
And when I say average user, I don't mean average Linux user, but like average just Windows user, because you gotta assume they're coming from an environment where this is all new. I like the fact that it's immutable though, because I can't go in there and break it. Like you can go into Windows registries and break everything.
Yeah.
All right guys, time to get on out of here. I hope you guys have enjoyed our first touch into Linux. I'm debating potentially throwing another drive in my system I just built and having it be just a Linux drive to screw around with at home. Honestly, I'm really thinking about that. While the graphics card out, now's the time to do it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, all right guys, thanks for watching. Like I said, if you're gonna be constructive down below, put that information. It'd be very helpful to not only us, but anyone else looking at this, considering Linux for the first time.
Again, like I love the fact that you were just clicking random games in your Steam library of like, who knows where it came from and like how old it was and stuff, and it was just working.
right.
Yeah, most of
The only one that didn't work was the one that was from like 2003.
Yeah. And honestly, it might not even work on modern Windows either.
Yeah. All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.